As we hear, unfortunately, some more tragic news rolling in, even today. This severity of the virus is becoming really evident, and more and more really hitting home, unfortunately. I'd like to spend a few minutes, a little bit more theoretical, about what the Talmud has to say about this. I think we're hearing from maybe some places statements like that Mashiach is here, calculations about 220 years before 6,000 and things like that, and maybe other things like that, which I don't think are helpful. I think those are harmful. And on the other hand, we're hearing lots of good medical advice, which is certainly the most important thing. But how about something in between? Is what is the wisdom of the Talmud about the current situation? This is not the first time in history wherein people have a plague. This is, every century or more, people in some city or another have been devastated by things like this. It's true in ancient Near East and everywhere else in the world, including for the rabbis of the Talmud. And so, therefore, I'm wondering what kind of wisdom can the rabbis share about what we're going through, and hopefully through that identification, through thinking through this with them, we can gain some tools and some skills. So this is going to be mostly a theoretical discussion, which means we're going to see lots of different opinions, and not every opinion that we're going to see, I think, might be appropriate to tell someone who's suffering or to tell a mourner. But still, I think that thinking through lots of different possibilities can be helpful, because as we process it, then if we are confronted with a real situation, we're pre-prepared for what to say and what to think. Okay, so they have a number of sources that I hope you can all see in front of you. I can make it a little bit bigger. It might be helpful. And feel free to write in the chat if any ideas you have come up. Okay, and so the first source I'd like to start with is the Mishnah in Masechet Ta'anit. Masechet Ta'anit has a long and profound discussion of when one fasts. For example, during the rain season, when rain is supposed to come and rain doesn't. Then one begins fasting, if rain still doesn't come, then the fast increase in severity. But also not only for rain not coming, but also if there's a plague in a city, and that city will fast, right? Just that city, because
Rabbi,
it affected only that city.
Can you shrink it a drop so that we could, because the pictures are covering the words.
Yep. Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay, great. So that city will then institute a fast, and then the surrounding cities will, that city itself will fast and blow shofar and pray, and the city surrounding it will either only fast or only blow shofar. So in other words, that city itself, which is the ground zero, will do both, but the cities surrounding, because they know that this may spread, and they are also in danger. And so then it defines, Ezehu David, what do we define as a plague that triggers the fasting that will occur? A city that has 500 soldiers, that can produce 500 soldiers if needed, and 3 people, individuals, pass away on 3 consecutive days, 1 on each day. So it actually gives us a kind of ratio of the halachic parameter of what a David is. I'm guessing if maybe a small village to produce 500 soldiers, maybe there'll be 10 times that many people, including elders and children. So maybe this would be a city of several thousand people. This might be a point, 0.5% or something like that, that are suffering from this plague in a short amount of time. So we can think about exactly what that ratio is. I don't think we are there currently in terms of our current virus, right? But because I think this happened every so often, the rabbis had to make a halachic marking, what is officially called David, called a plague. Next part of Mishnah then says, on these following things, one makes blow shofar everywhere, not only in the city itself and the surrounding cities, but in the whole land of Israel. If there's a drying of crops or a plant disease or locusts, because those can spread very, very quickly, and therefore the whole country has to begin praying. And sure enough, there's a story of one time they heard that there was in Ashkelon on the coast, there was a disease that affected the grain, and they immediately, even though it was just a small amount of grain, enough to fill an oven, and they immediately instituted fasts as far away as Jerusalem and everywhere else because they were afraid that it would spread. So this is the first. Response to a plague happening would be fasting and praying and blowing shofar. Does this indicate that it was because of sin that it happened? I mean, if it's saying we have to fast and therefore repent, right? Perhaps. Or perhaps it's saying no matter what the reason is, the response is always something's happening. Let's introspect. Let's think about ourselves. Let's improve ourselves, and hopefully that can help mitigate the situation. Okay, so that's response number one, fasting. I thought it was interesting that the chief rabbinate last week instituted a fast. It sounds like most communities around here and other places said better not to fast because we should keep up our immune system. So, but certainly tefillah is appropriate, and we are all doing that. Okay, so this saying, this is directed by Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore we are praying and fasting for him to intervene. Okay, response number two, which is a little bit more explicit, which is Mishnah Pirkei Avot. It says, David Bala Olam, why does plague, pestilence come to the world? Mitot hamurot b'Torah shelo nimsuru lebetin perot shevi'it. Because if people perform violations that they are are given to a human court to enforce, but there's no human court to enforce them, and they are chayav mitah, then the David comes and takes care of that. Also, because of shevi'it, 7th year of fruits, which one is not allowed to consume, if people are violating that. Okay, so this gives, it's a long Mishnah, it gives a one-to-one correlation between a certain sin and a punishment. And therefore you can kind of look it up as a dictionary and explain why it happened. And so this would fit with rabbinic prompting to say we should make teshuvah and give specific things of why certain things happen. However, I think when we read this today, we see, does this really apply today? Did it really apply then? Is it true that only places that didn't keep Shivi'it or this virus is going forth in, or only people who did some evil deed? We see that it seems kind of random, that there are righteous people, there are all kinds of people, different countries, different places, and people seem to be suffering equally. And so it would seem that this is not a satisfactory explanation for all the cases that we are experiencing. And I'd like to show that this is also not the only response in the Talmud. This is one of several responses. And I think that the next ones that we'll see can apply to us and resonate with us more. Okay, but this one so far is really the classical opinion. You could think of it as the friends of Iyov, right? When Iyov is suffering and mourning, his friends say, oh, you must have done something bad to have deserved this, right? And so that's a automatic response. And certainly a lot of times when something bad happens, it is in fact because somebody did something wrong, right? If someone drives and drinks and they get into an accident, well, yeah, they did something wrong, they deserve that. So certainly some punishment is because of sin, but it doesn't mean that all punishment is because of sin, which is the conclusion of the book of Iyov. And I think there we can get into the next a series of sources that dig a little bit deeper and are more introspective about this. Okay, the next source is going to be a Mechilta, which is a Midrash. It's going to be source number 6, but it cites several Pesukim, and I want to explain the Pesukim first so that we are ready to appreciate what the Midrash says. Pasuk in Yeshayahu says, Lech Ami, come my people, Bo b'chaderecha usgor delatecha ba'adecha, Chavi kimat rega ad ya'avor za'am. My people, go and enter into your chambers, into your homes, and lock the door behind you. Hide just for a little while until the anger, until the danger passes. Right? Certainly sounds prophetic. Okay, so he seems to be referring to, I don't know what kind of danger. It could be an enemy outside, or it could be some disease, right, that he was thinking about. And he's thinking about some, end of days when this terrible thing is going to happen. Okay, that's pasuk number 1 that the Midrash is going to quote. Okay, pasuk number 2 that it's going to quote is from Yechezkel, from Atel Admat Yisrael, for Amar Adonai hineni elayich vehotzeti charbi mita'ara v'chrati mimech sadik v'rasha. It says that when God comes and pulls out his sword, time of punishment, he cuts down both the righteous and the wicked. So this is a very, very important pasuk because it's saying that even when there is a time of danger, both the righteous and the wicked will suffer together, right? So this is going to introduce the opinion that is different from the friends of Eov, because these righteous will suffer not because of their sin, but because of the collective, a collective punishment. Okay, we'll see how the Midrash and the Talmud cite that. And finally, the third pasuk that we need for understand our Midrash is one that's relevant to Pesach. That says, "Ulkachtem agudat ezov utnotem batam asher basaf." That Bnei Israel in Egypt, they put the blood on the doorposts, and Moshe tells them, "Atem lo tesu ish mepetach beto ad boker." Do not leave your home until the morning, and that way you will be safe inside from the mashchit, from the destroyer. There was a meme going around. Moshe had said, "Everybody go, stay inside your home," and then some people said, "Oh, but Moshe, but we can go out from minyan, right?" I said, no, you got to stay inside, right? And then the people said, "Oh, but we can go out to the restaurant, then we'll come back." And Moshe says, no, stay inside the whole night, right? Okay. So if we put all these Pesukim together, we have the next source, which is the Mechilta, our early Tannaitic Midrash, that says as follows: "V'atem lo tetze'u ish mepetach beto." Do not leave. Magid mishenitna reshut lamashchit lechaber eno mavchin ben tzadik larasha. Very profound statement that once permission is given to the destroyer, it does not distinguish between righteous and wicked. Right? In other words, if everybody was good and doing everything well, then bad things wouldn't happen. But once punishment comes, then there's a sense of collective punishment. That's the group, the community as a whole, that will bear the brunt of it, even though it was only the Rishaim that caused it in the first place. And how does the Midrash know this? One pasuk is from Yeshaya, Bo b'chaderecha uskod elatecha ba'decha. He's telling his people, right, the Jewish people, close your doors because it's going to be a time of punishment for all nations. So even the Jewish people. And it says, pasuk from Yechezkel that says, God will cut down both the righteous and the wicked, which is an appropriate pasuk for this idea. And finally, V'haya ba'avor kibodi, which is a different context, when Hashem is passing by and protects Moshe. Sounds like if Moshe had gone out of the cave, then he also would have been harmed. So even Moshe has to protect himself at a time when God's presence is strong. Okay, so that's an early source. And now I want to follow through and see how the source is developed in the Talmud Bavli. This is the longest sugya, and this was what I would call a Tractate Coronavirus. If the rabbis were writing a Masechet today, I think it would look something like this. And we'll see a lot of really, really interesting things, and we're looking forward to hearing your feedback on it. So it says, Taneh, Rav Yosef, going back to the pasuk in Shemot, what does it mean that Moshe said you should not leave your homes until the morning? Again, the same idea. Once permission is given to the destroyer, it does not distinguish between righteous and evil. And not only that, the Bavli adds, it may even begin with the righteous. As it says in Yechezkel, V'chratim mecha sadik v'rasha. The Bavli here is adding another point, that sometimes the righteous might be the first. They're at the forefront. They are the leaders. We'll see this come up again. And here we have, this was kind of theoretical, looking at Pesukim, right, deriving their interpretation. But here we feel the emotion of the rabbis. The rabbi who just taught that says, Bachir Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef, whenever he taught this statement, he would cry. Says, all these people, the righteous people, are they really compared to nothing? That all of their righteousness, right, all of their hard work, all the good things they do, yet cannot protect them at a time of destruction. And so that's why he would cry. Abaye would try to cheer him up. And he said, actually, it's for their own benefit. When such destruction happens, perhaps the righteous don't want to see it, don't want to experience it. And so better for them to perish before they experience it. I don't know if that's such consolation to him. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav le'olam yikanes adam bechitov v'yatzeh bechitov shneimar v'atem osim petach beto ad boker. And so now some practical advice. When one is commuting, you should always commute during the day. If you're entering a city, do it during the day. Kitov is when light was created, and things are safer in the daytime. Not good to travel at night. And also when you're leaving, you should also leave the city and go back to your farm, to your village, also during the day. Okay, so nighttime is dangerous. And then the next statement, Tanur Banan, another Talmudic statement, Dever Ba'ir Kanes Raglecha. If there is a plague in the city, gather your feet, meaning don't go out of your house, right? Don't walk around too much, don't travel much. As it says, Lo Titzeum Isha Petach Beto, the pasuk from Yeshaya. Alecha mi b'chederecha, and quoting Atecha, and then quoting Devarim, Mechutz Tishak el Chereb, Mechaderim Emad is from Ha'azinu, right? When the sword is outside, and there are terrors within, so therefore don't go outside. Outside is dangerous. So it seems that, right, Hazal had a sense of when there's a plague out, when there's disease, then going outside is dangerous. This is something that is contagious, and one needs to stay inside. And so they're understanding, they're bringing an equivalence between that mashchit, that destroying power that was in Egypt that killed the firstborn. They saw that as a model for disease that is rampant in the city, anytime and any place, and therefore the advice is the same, stay home and stay safe. Okay, analyzing this a little bit further, the Talmud wonders, why does it quote several pisukim here? Mai ve'omer, right? You already quoted one pasuk, why do you have to bring a second and then a third? Well, you might say, when Moshe says don't go out at night, but it means you can go out during the day, right? Only at night, that's when there are demonic forces, bad forces out, bad people. It might be danger. But in the daytime, you might think it's okay. And therefore, the pasuk from Yeshaya says, no, even at night, at a time of disease, even at night, it's not safe to go out. And then you might say, this is true, that's only when you're not worried about being inside, but when you're worried about inside too, maybe you should go out, right? Better to be in general company. And it says, no, even if there's some fear about being inside, but when the fear outside, the danger outside is greater, then stay inside no matter what, even in that case. In other words, it's saying, this is to do the opposite of what we would normally do, right? Normally, when we're afraid of everyday robbers or dangerous people or crime, then you want to go to a public place. You don't want to be alone, certainly not at night, right? You want to be around other people, that's safer. But this kind of danger is different. And therefore, this kind of danger, even though it might be scary even to be home, but outside is worse, so stay home. Okay, so they have pretty good advice. And here Rava would do something similar. At a time when there was a plague, Rava would close the window. As it says in Yirmiyah, Ki alam mavet b'chalonenu, right? It can come in from the window, the wind can carry it, and so he would really shut himself up totally. Okay, the sages said, when there's famine in the city, leave the city altogether, right? I don't know, go to Deal or something. And we learned this from Abraham. When there was a famine in Israel, he went down to Egypt. And similarly, there's a story in the book of Kings about some lepers, and so they were out of the machaneh, out of the camp, And so they said, no, we're going to die out here. Let's go to the city, even the city of the enemies. At least maybe we'll have a chance over there to live. And that's where they find out the vulnerabilities, and they're able to win the war because of that. Okay, and so that's the next line of the pasuk. Whether you're sure or unsure, it says. That's why it brings both pasukim, right? If you're unsure that this is a safe place or not, then go. But even if it's not definite that going to the next place is going to be safer, go anyway, right? Try to get out. Well, this is good advice, in general, where the threat is localized. But in our case, not sure if this will help too much. Okay, and finally, the last statement of the Talmud here says, "David Ba'ir al yelech adam be'emsa haderech." If there is plague in the city, do not walk in the middle of the street, in the middle of the path. Rather, walk to the side, because Malach HaMavet, the danger, right, the angel of death, is walking in the middle. He's going rampant and attacking everybody. So stay off to the side. Whereas in general, if it's a normal situation, then it's better to walk in the middle of the street. That's safer. Usually crooks and bad people, they stay on the side of the road. And so I think this is what we could call social distancing, right? Stay on the side. If you need to go out, right, stay away from public areas and don't be near anybody else. So although Hazal are couching it in terms of destroying, destroying angel or anger and wrath and things like that, I think that, well, they didn't have a term for germs, so it's pretty much still the same advice that they had, and they're saying when plague comes around, yes, we fast and we pray, but this entire Talmud is saying, listen, that doesn't necessarily solve everything, and just because someone is righteous doesn't mean that they will be saved either, right? It's not because of something that they did wrong, but rather this is the nature of the situation, and therefore pray and fast, but also take practical steps to stay away from other people, stay indoors, stay alone, walk by yourself, and thereby be protected. So I think this is pretty interesting and pretty relevant even before an age of science, that they figured out the most important advice. Okay, there's a parallel Talmud, and this is a short Talmud, and I'll end with this source, and then we can open up for comments and your thoughts. Why does it say in Bereshit, Chalilalach? This is going to get more into the theodicy of, why does God do this? Why should righteous people suffer along with the wicked? And so Abraham says, Chalilalach, right? How can you do this, Hashem, to destroy Sadiq im Dasha? Is talking about Sodom, even if most of the people there are wicked, but maybe there's a few righteous. So God, shouldn't you save the city because of them? And the Talmud says, Ibn Hashem chulinhu. The word chalila means chulin. God, this is an unholy act to do this, to kill the wicked, to kill the righteous along with the wicked. It's not befitting you, God, who is holy and all good. So that was Abraham's challenge. And now the Talmud contrasts the pasuk that Abraham says with the pasuk we already said with in Yechezkel. Velo, is that true? Is that really indeed the case that Abraham said that God will not kill the righteous along with the wicked? But doesn't it say in Yechezkel, I will cut off from you both the righteous and the wicked? And so here we have a contradiction. Abraham assumes that God does not do that, but the later prophet Yechezkel says that God does do that. And so what is the answer? How do we harmonize these pisukim? And Talmud answers, Besadik sheno gamor. A Sadiq, yes, he's a righteous person, but not completely righteous. If someone is completely righteous, they will be saved no matter what. But if someone is not completely righteous, they're mostly righteous, but they have some problems. Those can be chinks in their armor, and thereby cause a vulnerability. And that imperfect Sadiq may still receive not punishment, but will get caught up in the community's suffering. And then Talmud asks one last question. But it says that in another pasuk in Yechezkel, it says that, and begin in my sanctuary. And it said, don't read Mimikudashi in my sanctuary, but rather Mimikudashai, with those who sanctify me. In other words, the greatest, right? The greatest of the holy will also suffer. These are people who fulfill the Torah from A to Z, from Aleph ad Taf. Even they may suffer. So now we have a further question. You can't just tell me Sadiq Sheno Gamor. And the final answer is, Hatamnami kevan shaya biyadam limchot v'lo michu, havu lehu kesadikim shenan gemurim. In that case also, even though they were perfect Sadiqim, but they could have done something more, not for themselves, but for everyone else. They could have intervened. They could have helped those who were doing something wrong and given them advice, given them rebuke, and thereby saved other people from being evil, from doing the wrong thing. And so it was not enough that they were perfectly righteous themselves. They had to be more activists. They had to be leaders and save everybody else. And therefore, it's those people who may also suffer. They could have done something about it, and they didn't. Those people will also suffer. So I think this section, which is in some ways parallels, quoting the very same Pesukim as we saw before, but doing it in a way that is more challenging and focusing on the philosophy, on the Sadiq V'Ra'lo itself. So what are some of our takeaways here? When we think about what's going on, we want to find a source, a reason, right? What went wrong? What could we have done? And we can start at the origin, because at the origin, there really was human evil involved here. We know based on our science that this virus itself started from bats and moved over to probably some other animal before it got to humans. Most likely, I think it's the pangolin that the rat infested. The rat gave it to the pangolin. And then these animals, some kind of anteater, were sold in the wet markets in China. Well, why were they sold there? Well, because the Chinese, you can look here, they thought this has medicinal value. This is good luck. It helps people with blood clotting disease and infertility and things like that. And this is an endangered species. Yet there are people that are hunting them and using them for what they think is some kind of magical gain. And this is the beginning, right? These are people who are denying international law about protecting species. And more importantly, they're doing something really unethical in their treatment of the rest of nature, of the animal kingdom. When we think of the laws of kashrut, all the animals that we are allowed to eat are domesticated. These are animals that we grow on our own farms. And so there's no danger that they will become extinct, right? This is a way of being able to be sustainable. And Torah makes sure, it says there are no kosher animals that are out in the wild. The wild is there. And so the boundaries that we are crossing, and those specific people and cultures that are crossing, that is the beginning of this evil. And so there are real Rishaim that are, these are the kinds of people that go and hunt elephants and take their tusks and things like that. But then once that evil is let out, that doesn't stop only with those who perpetrated, those who did something wrong. It spreads then to the rest of the world, and unfortunately causes even righteous people to suffer, as we are seeing. And we think about good people, right? Righteous people. Yet even here, we can think of lots of ways we could have done more to prevent this and predict this. Scientists, epidemiologists said this is coming at some point later, sooner or later. And just as an example, and with the American government has plans to buy ventilators, tens of thousands of them. An article in the New York Times that this is going back several years. They knew that this may happen. but they had a contract with one small company, and it was bought by a big company, and it didn't fall through. And then just the bureaucracy, taking years and years just to get a few thousand ventilators. In other words, there are real people that are supposed to be responsible for the public health, for the public good, that are doing their job, but insufficiently. So these are good people. They're not doing anything bad, but they could have done more for others and didn't. And then so this, hits home, and we think about the actions that we have taken and still need to take in order to protect everyone else. And so overall, when we think about why this happens, there is an element of negligence, of maybe even just a few people that are really wicked and have done things that cannot be forgiven. But beyond that, once it spreads, we're all in this together, and shows more than ever how this is one world, one planet, that we're all responsible, and ultimately all responsible each for the other. So I think this is a larger scale than what we've seen before, but in its essence, this is a kind of plague that was experienced throughout history, including by the rabbis of the Talmud. And by looking at the recommendations, at the teachings of the Talmud, I find some solace that we're not the first people to be struggling through this, to be dealing with this, but that we can look to the words of Hazal and gain wisdom from them. And through that wisdom, we also can turn to prayer, can turn to hope, can turn to faith. At the same time, take all the practical steps that we need to in order to stay safe, in order to stay home, and to protect ourselves, protect our loved ones, and protect everybody else. So I hope that this tour through Tractate Coronavirus was helpful to you, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. I'm happy to share the source sheet if anybody would like.
Yeah, can you send that by email, Rabbi?
Yeah, I can actually, I'll put it on this chat here.
Great.
Okay. Someone asked, once the dust settles and we're able to look at all the data, how do you think this will play out in terms of anti-Semitism? And what can we do about it? Are there any lessons in our history that we can look to? That is a really important point. Historically, whenever there have been plagues, often after that, there's some minority that's pointed to that is made as a scapegoat to suffer. There might be different minorities, but in many cases it was the Jewish people, and in probably every case undeserved. Nevertheless, we really have to make sure that our own communities are at the forefront of keeping people safe, and making sure that we are advocating on behalf of everybody, our entire city, our entire state. I know there's right now there's a bunch of a letter going out to Trump and to the governor to request for more ventilators to come to New York because this is the epicenter. And at first, some of the people said, "Well, let's get all the rabbis to sign this." And then I said, "Well, it shouldn't just be rabbis, because then it looks like we're just asking for the Jewish people." And so then we went back and we added imams and priests. So I think that's a much better way of doing it, and to really show ourselves and show others that we feel very much a part of the suffering of all the communities that are happening around us. Yep, thank you.
So, question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it halakha or advice that when there is a plague in the town, you should stay at home? And is it brought down by Rambam? Is it brought down by Shulchan Aruch? And if it is, or even if it's not, are the rabbis using this to encourage people who are less inclined to believe scientists, but more inclined to follow the Gemara, to stay at home, stay inside?
Right. Good. I don't know if any rabbis have quoted this. I haven't seen this quoted, but I'm not tracking the everyday news and Haredi communities. So yeah, maybe it would be a good idea to do that, right? But I think the main point is that there's no contradiction between the Torah and science, but very much Torah wants us to protect ourselves, and therefore that means following whatever the scientists say. So I'm not sure if that would be a great idea, because there might be other things like washing hands or something that are not necessarily in the, although actually I think the Netilat Yadayim has saved a lot of Jews throughout history from getting sick. That and a lot of other hygienic probably serve the Jewish communities very well, knowingly or unknowingly. So, yep, good point. Good point. Okay, we have another question on my chat. It's private, but I'll read it. Was there any example in Talmud or other rabbinic writings that blamed a certain plague on a particular sin? And if you have time to answer another one, did the rabbis ever make a correlation between plagues and cleanliness? Yeah, in terms of the cleanliness laws, I can't think of any source that does that. But yes, I think there are lots of places that correlate a particular event with a particular sin, and you could probably think of lots of them. For three reasons, women dying in childbirth and things like that. And I think the idea behind that is that the rabbis at certain different times and places saw a lapse in commitment or around a certain value or a certain law, and therefore wanted to drive that home and emphasize it. But when you look at the Talmudic discussions on that, you see that they know that that's not the only reason that these things happen, but rather they want to allow for the consciousness, awareness raising that an event has, to be a prompt to better ourselves. So, I think less important is knowing why something happened. When we had prophets, they could tell us why, what's in God's mind and why this happened and why that happened. But after the time of Nevuah, I remember I asked the Rosh Hashiva of my school, Rav Lichtenstein, I remember what was going on at the time, but some bad thing, and lots of people saying, oh, this is why, it's because of this sin and that sin. And I asked him about it, and he said, who can have the audacity to say they know what's in God's mind? So, we can take guesses, but I don't think that's worth our time. Rather, once something happens, we say, how can we build off of this? How can we become better from this? How can we come together and become stronger? And so I think we're doing a lot of introspection and a lot of strengthening in our community now from this. Okay, so Maurice asks, 500 soldiers and 3 people dying in consecutive days. What publisher we're talking about then, as I compared to it now? Yeah, so population overall was much less. I'm thinking 500. Said I can produce 500 soldiers, maybe has 5,000 people, right? That makes sense? And so, or let's round it up to 6,000. And so 3 people dying is 1 in 2,000 people. So is that 0.05% within a small time frame?
You're going to say 1 in 6,000 a day.
You can say 1,000, yeah, 1,000th a day.
Every day.
Yeah.
For a city like New York.
1/10,000th every day, right? And the point is not just at one point, but it's a pattern that continues, kind of a chazakah. So they're kind of making graphs also, right? So yeah, they're even though they they have all the science, but they did definitely notice some patterns. I saw a nice a funny meme that said it was a graph that goes like this, and it said the number of times people have seen exponential graphs in the past month, right? So that's grown exponentially itself. Okay, back to Gindi. Asks, so what should be our reaction when we hear that certain precarious rabbis in Israel recommend saying ketoret in addition to social distance to combat this pandemic? Prestigious rabbis saying to say the ketoret. Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question, because the ketoret is associated with stopping plague. We see examples of that in Tanakh, and so it makes sense that they would that we would make that association. Okay, so I think the key thing is, in addition to social distancing, right? So the most important thing is that they do the social distancing. But the ketoret, using that as some kind of magic, I'm afraid may border on an avodah zarah thing. I think the Ketoret is meant to remind us to think about Reach Nichoach, to bring beauty into the Bet HaMikdash, to glorify God. And so, we do that in many different ways, not through a rote recitation of ingredients. So my father-in-law is on the call here, and he could tell you a lot about Ketoret in those instances and what they mean. I think when Aaron is running through the camp with the Ketoret, he's the Kohen Gadol who's doing it, and he's serving as a reminder to people, an exemplar to people of what they should be doing, teshuvah, and not simply a magic formula. Okay, I know other people say maybe some kind of fumigation, but I don't know how that would work. Okay, Miriam Zami asked, and Hagahan Shulchan Aruch, similarly, you should be careful of all things that cause danger, because danger is stricter than transgression. And one should be more careful with an uncertain danger than with an uncertain isur. They also prohibit to go in a dangerous place, such as under a leaning wall or alone at night. The rabbi is also prohibited to drink water from rivers at night, to put one's mouth to one stream of water to drink, because these matters have a concern of danger. It is a widespread custom not to drink water during the equinox, and so on. They also flee from the city when a plague, and one should leave at the beginning of the plague and not at the end. Well, that's really good advice. Okay.
It's terrible advice.
To leave at the beginning, before it spreads, right? You see,
you're going to scatter the plague all over.
Okay, that's true. That's as bad for the people in Deal, but
bad for everyone.
That's exactly what happened here. What do you mean?
And it's the opposite of the Gemara. The Gemara says just stay in your house. Don't shelter in place.
Okay, I was thinking of it as if it's contained early on, right? And maybe kick out that person who has the disease, which was done with the sarat. We don't know exactly what sarat was, but if it's some kind of contagious disease, right, it would have been a good idea to kick that person out, or a home that has mold in it, right, to block it out and even knock down the home if it kept spreading. All this is because of danger. The person who guards his soul will distance himself from them. It's prohibited to rely on a miracle in all these matters. Okay, wonderful source. Thank you, Miriam, for sharing that. Really, really excellent. And that's
I thought it's interesting when Z was asking about does anybody talk about this in actual halacha? Like, this is something that could be used, for people that care about this.
Right, 100%.
Also, not all viruses have like a dormant period. This one, you could leave early and then you could actually have the risk of passing it to somebody. But most of the time, if you don't have any symptoms, then you probably don't have it. So
Right. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. If there's something that the danger was was clearer, happened more immediately, then it would be a good idea if you're healthy then to leave that place. Yep. So that's a very good point. All right. So I want to thank everybody for joining. I hope that these thoughts, these ideas were helpful to you, and I think they were interesting to me to think through. Because we are people of the book, we are people of memory, and when something happens in the Jewish people, it's never something completely new. And chadash tachat hashamesh. Whatever we're experiencing, it's always connected with something that happened in the past. And I think this is a good message for Pesach coming up, as we experience the Yetziat Mitzrayim. Yetziat Mitzrayim is we always bring it back, and wherever we are coming from or going, whatever persecution the Jewish people has experienced in the past or problems, we always look to the paradigms. And he said Mitzrayim has a paradigm of things are terrible, but then in just a short time, right before we can even wait for the dough to rise, in an instant, redemption comes and we're saved. And we look to that paradigm again and again. And so the words of the Tanakh, the experiences, and teachings of Nevi'im are not one-time events and one-time teachings, but rather these are models that we look to again and again. And so too, in our time, although we may feel scared, we may feel lonely, we should feel connected with all those in the past who have also experienced problems. I just read a beautiful insight that says, in Greek sources, it says when someone like Prometheus is suffering, it's because Zeus has left him, right, and he feels lonely. But in the Jewish tradition, it's the opposite. Those who are in trouble, those who are in need, Hashem is closer to them and suffering along with them and through them. And so at this time, we can, I think, feel closer to our tradition, closer to our past, and closer to our Kadosh Baruch Hu. And we hope and pray that we will safely navigate ourselves through this. And the last point is that we're focused on so many things in our lives, both necessary and fun and unnecessary and whatever it is. But thinking about these dangers that are out there that were in fact predictable, and taking leadership positions. I've been watching the past few weeks how certain individuals from our community have just rose up to leadership positions and in making public policy and creating public statements and letters and making sure people are safe. And if it wasn't for those few people, then we would be behind the curve. It only takes a few motivated people, a few leaders, and each and every one of us has that leadership capability. And so whether it be right now or just thinking about the future, what are the needs of our poor, our needy? What are the needs in terms of spiritual, physical, medical, right? All kinds of things that there's no end of causes to think about. And that's what it means to be Sadiq Gamur, to be not only looking out for ourselves, but to be looking out for all those around us. And that merit, may all those who are sick have speedy recovery, and may we see our redemption, our Geulah, very, very soon. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.